Trafalgar D. Waterlaw is one of One Piece's best fighters. During the course of One Piece's 1100 chapters, we've seen a large variety in different styles people use in combat. Some use more common ways of fighting, and some are just a bit too unorthodox. But in this wild world on the high seas, Law still has managed to stand out, being a very formidable fighter with a 3 billion berry bounty known as the Surgeon of Death. In this video, I will simply just be diving into Law's style of fighting by analyzing all of Law's attacks from his devil fruit powers and going into how he uses them, along with his swordsmanship, haki, and medical knowledge, as that too gives him a big advantage. As always, if you'd enjoy more One Piece content like this, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe, because YouTube tells me that 99% of you who watch my videos just aren't subscribed for some reason. So be sure to subscribe and comment on ideas of videos you'd like to see be done in the comment section below. The most well-known aspect of Law is his usage of his devil fruit, the Opi Opi no Mi, being a very rare fruit that is even worth 5 billion berries. This fruit has the ability to, as Corazon puts it, alter the human body, with the operations performed while having this fruit being able to cure even unidentified ailments. But in order for the user to be able to make the most of this fruit, one needs exceptional medical knowledge, making this fruit perfect for Law, and what he can do with it only makes him even more intense. Law's natural talent for medical practice is first shown on chapter 761, when Law is able to look at his medical charts and assess how long he has left to live with his illness. But before we go too far into this, it's best we first talk about the capabilities given to Law from his devil fruit. Law, most commonly when using this fruit, creates spaces centered around himself, or known as rooms, which leads to everything becoming within his attack range. As Smoker puts it, this is his operating room. Inside this, he reigns supreme and operates at will. While inside Law's room, Law can cut up and just discombobulate his opponents while leaving them still alive. This is probably Law's most common way of fighting, and he can even take this to another level, as way back in Dressrosa, Law made his room so big that it was invisible for the eye to see. But the problem with doing this is the toll that it takes on Law's body from this ability. Consistently throughout Dressrosa, we are told this, and that Law holds himself back from fighting as a whole to save as much energy as he can for when he fights Doflamingo. Law even explains this drain, as the rooms that he creates saps his stamina the more he uses them. But a way that Law can go around this is by using Scan, an ability Law uses where he creates a very thin barrier towards his opponent and uses it to disarm the weapons they are wielding. Another very common ability Law uses is Shambles. While inside his room using Shambles, Law can swap the places of anything that is inside by simply swapping his fingers. What's so OP about this is that Law uses this to swap the location of an attack coming at him with something that is completely harmless, and he uses this to move himself around his room in a way that gives him mobility as if he was teleporting. And with just a finger, Law can move various objects within his room as he wants. Law does this on things as big as naval battleships, and even moves large boulders from the ground, dropping them directly onto Kaido. Now, I know there are a bunch of other abilities Law has shown to use. While I will cover those, I think that it's important we cover other skills that Law has that are needed to use with his room already placed around his opponent. When we talk about Law, a skill of his that is commonly ignored or just forgotten is his skill with a sword. Through Oda's comments in Usopp's Pirate Galleries, Oda consistently refers to Law as a swordsman, showing his blade does hold importance aside for just inside his rooms. When you look at what is said about Law in One Piece Magazine 14, it is that he fights with his sword using various kinds of styles that also involve some of his devil fruit abilities. With these devil fruit abilities and swordsmanship skills, Law will use his swordsmanship if needed based on his opponent's weakness, a skill that the magazine describes as sort of a specialty to Law. The range of Law's sword gives him an advantage, being able to cut something from a very far distance away. While within his room, Law can use this advantage to be able to cut a lot of things within one swing and let his devil fruit powers do their job. Another way Law combines swordsmanship and his devil fruit powers is by using tact to move his sword right into the opponent's chest and spin it at high speed. This technique Law uses is described in Law's Viver card to be slashing from the abdomen to the chest all at once. But with his sword alone, Law can release an electric shock onto his opponent. Law will use this by closing in on his opponent, taking aim while he has closed the distance between himself and who he is fighting. When using this, Law oftenly targets his opponent's heart, showing one of many abilities of his that negate durability. Another strategy that the magazine seems to suggest Law uses is that he will use counter shock to restrict the reconnection of limbs that he has chopped off, which is pretty useful if he uses it while inside his room or even when fighting people like Doflamingo, who has shown the ability to reconstruct parts of his body using his devil fruit abilities. Law also uses the electricity he generates in another way, by using his sword coated in electricity to cut through or cut off a limb from his opponents. This attack is called Radio Knife, and what makes this attack different as for the next few minutes, powers or abilities will make a person be unable to reattach their body together. Using his sword, Law uses his understanding of human anatomy to help guide him where he targets. Where Law aims for is his opponent's vital points, using his sword to inject a serious blow. Just remember that Law himself is a doctor, so his thorough knowledge of the body is extremely important in terms of where Law plans to land his hit. So having a lot of attacks that negate durability is very useful. When it comes to Law's surgical abilities, I went into some of these attacks briefly when it was relevant to what I was talking about. As I already mentioned towards the beginning of this video about how one needs medical knowledge to make the most of the Opi Opi no Mi, when they do eat the fruit, it will instantly make you one of the greatest doctors in the world because of these capabilities. But besides that, Law's Gamma Knife is one of the best examples of Law putting his medical knowledge to use. This technique targets and does damage to the internal organs. When using this technique, Law isn't aiming to do a lot of external damage. That's because how he negates one's durability is due to the electric shock the attack charges up. Lastly, with Scalpel, this attack is pretty different. The way it's described tells me that Haki is actually used as the only attack in his arsenal where Law is using Haki. Overall, this technique concentrates power into one point. Releasing energy along with a thrust is how it is said to work. This attack Law uses on Smoker, leading to Law being able to hit his heart out of his body. With attacks like these where Law can literally just go and pick up something as important as your heart, it just gives Law again another advantage. Back in Wano, we started to get more familiar with Devil Fruit awakenings. Law has awakened his fruit, and while we don't know when this happened, we know very well of his capabilities, taking how Law fights to a whole other level. When we first see Law use his awakening, he gets two new abilities that he wraps over his sword. They are K-Room and Anesthesia. This combination, Law stabs his opponent with his sword, and although simply his sword piercing won't do much because of the K-Room coating, but we see powerful shockwaves being created inside his target, and with Shock Willy, a lot of internal damage is done, seeing what happened to Big Mom and Blackbeard drawing blood from them. These shockwaves can cause damage to things as strong as the bones inside someone's body. This happened to Big Mom, and the damage could be even far greater depending on the opponent. The other set of abilities Law has is Re-Room and Silence. Using Re-Room, Law can directly make a room that is attached to his target, and then he uses Silence to remove all noise from them within the room, which in my opinion is just kind of useless. What I like about all of these abilities though is how all of these work so well together with his other selection of abilities. Lastly, I wanted to quickly cover this as I know a bunch of people will wonder why I never went into it, but Law is not a fighter who really uses Haki. While Law is stated to have armament and observation Haki, throughout his fights in the series, whenever Law is engaging with his sword, Law just does not coat his sword with armament Haki. Personally, I think all that is pretty silly as there's no reason for him not to, but also with the time skip's massive power cliff due to the characters learning and mastering Haki. Law also has observation Haki, which we do actually see him use, but he uses it mainly for its sensing capabilities, which we see gets noted here and there. And there isn't really too much to say about it as it's only shown a few times at best. Leading into where Law stands currently, we may see him use more Haki in fights due to what he learned in Wano. Against Blackbeard and his crew, we see him use Haki to counter master Doc Q's Devil Fruit powers, so hopefully after Law making note of this advantage, showing how he developed from fighting Kaido and Big Mom and seeing him understand more of Haki's importance, we can see him use it more, as for someone like Law, it can be used to help him even more in future fights, to help him beat some of One Piece's best fighters.